Hi, welcome. In this tutorial, Christopher and I are going to show you a couple of examples of using the TEI header to encode various information about the history and description of the object on which your text is written. This is something which not all scholarly editors are going to want to be able to record, but sometimes you are, and for different kinds of objects and different kinds of texts, what you record might be quite different. So we're going to give two quite different examples. The example that I'm going to show is going to be this this text, which if you've followed the some of the other tutorials in this series, you'll have seen before. This is Sybil Wigglesworth's gravestone. Therefore it's a three-dimensional object. It's made of stone. There's various historical and geographic information that we can record about it. And Christopher's going to in a few minutes going to show you a manuscript, which he's also showed in one of these tutorials. So I'm going to keep this object just as a reminder. This is the gravestone. The text is written on it here. I'll go to full screen so we can see a bit better. The text is written on it here. I transcribed the text in one of the other tutorials, which you'll see in the background. There's this image at the top. The text has this interesting shape, and there's various information about it. It has date information on it, as most gravestones do. I'm going to leave this text, this image in the background, so you can we can see it and we can be reminded of what it looks like, while I am in Oxygen here with the transcribed text in the foreground. And so the text is just there in the background for us to be looking at as I start to fill this in. So you saw us encode the text, or if not, here's a transcription of the text. And further up in your TEI document, in this XML file, if you've created this XML file from the TEI P5 all profile in Oxygen, as I did, you will see there are various parts of the TEI header, which is this section up here, that are pre-filled. There's a title, and you might want to give this document a title. There's publication information if you want to record that, but the information about the document, the document or the object, the text-bearing object, is here in source desk. This is a description of the source, and this can be description about the scholarly source of your text that you're encoding, or it can be a description about the source of the manuscript itself. And in this case, the default information which has been put in here by Oxygen, I'm going to delete, because what I want to put in some information that TEI enables us to do in an element called MS_desk. The MS_desk, you'll see as I entered this, it automatically gave me this MS identifier, which is a required piece of information. The MS identifier is, according to the TEI, every manuscript or every object that bears text has an identifier which usually involves a repository of some kind. And this is the unique identifier which enables us to record and point to the this manuscript. Now, if TEI is being used to encode text that you have transcribed from a manuscript which is in a library and has a class mark or an inventory number in that library and so forth, then this makes perfect sense. However, this gravestone doesn't have an inventory number, and it doesn't have a repository, really. I mean, I suppose the cemetery that it's in is its repository, but if it was an ancient gravestone that was no longer in an active cemetery, it wouldn't necessarily have a repository at all. Which again, this is TEI making assumptions that we sometimes have to work around. In this case, I don't have a repository or an identifying number for this, so I'm going to just use the one workaround that TEI allows, which is I'm going to give it an MS name, and I'm going to say that this manuscript's name is the gravestone of Sybil, what was her name? Wigglesworth. And I'm going to stop there, and that it lets me do that. Christopher will, when he shows us his example in a few minutes, will show us an example of a document that is in a library and therefore does have proper MS identifier information, but my one doesn't. The other things that I want to talk about in here then are the physical description of the object and the history of the object. And there are a few things nested within each of those that that we might want to say about an object. And again, my focus on this is going to be quite different from Christopher's when he shows you his example. So the physical description is fairly easy to remember. Is in an element called physdesk, which can contain various components. The things that I'm interested in for this object inside physdesk are the object desk. So let me type that again so that it completes it. Let me type it again in English so that it auto completes it. So object desk, it's the first thing I want to talk about. And one might want to talk about the hand description, and one might want to talk about the decoration description. Those, and as you see, those are currently invalid because they need to have more content. The object description, in turn, can have two kinds of information about the object. You could just have a paragraph with a description with some text in there, or you could further structure it by having the support description, which is the description of the stone as a whole, in this case, and the layout description, which is a description specifically of the part of the stone with a text on and a description of that. So the support desk is a three-dimensional description. The layout description is essentially a two-dimensional description of that field. So for the support description, I might both have some prose saying, you know, this is a gravestone, and I'm not going to write this out, but, you know, I could describe the stone, I could talk about various things about it, but I could also have in here some structured information. I could, for example, have, again, I need to stop typing so quickly so that it will auto-complete. Now, I guess it does need to be in a paragraph. I could have the object type, which I would say gravestone. I'm going to nest these so that they look nicer on the page. I could have material, where I'm going to say that this is granite. I don't know for a fact that it's granite, but looking at the photograph, it looks like granite to me. And I could have dimensions. Sorry, again, I typed too quickly. Dimensions. And under dimensions, I can say that the height of this stone is 80 centimeters. The width of this stone is 100 centimeters. And the depth, it's a little bit hard to tell from this photograph, but I'm going to guess the depth is about 7 centimeters. And just to be absolutely clear, I can say in an attribute that the unit here is centimeters in all three cases. Or actually, it would have been much easier for me to just put unit on dimensions and not need to repeat it on them because the unit is the same on all three, right? So that's my description of the support. My layout description would just say this text is written in a in a patterned border within the middle of the stone. I could give the dimensions of that, although I haven't measured them, and I could say something about the lines and so forth if I wanted to, as that's the layout description. Again, that could either be structured with things like dimensions, or it could just be a paragraph of prose saying what's in there. Hand description is where I can describe one or more hands, and each of those will go in a hand note. And in this case, there is only one hand, but nevertheless, I still need to have a hand note. And inside the hand note, I will say various things about the writing system. So I might mention the fact that there are various ligatures in here. I might mention the many abbreviations in here, the mix of uppercase and lower and cursive, let's say. You know, I might mention all sorts of things in there. Again, it's mostly prose. I could, if I want to, include a height element to talk about the heights of the individual letters. The letters are 1.5 centimeters high, and if I want to be absolutely clear, I can give them a unit of centimeter as well. Again, I haven't measured the letters, I'm just making that up. The last thing under physical description then is decoration description. That's particularly for many objects, that's not particularly interesting, but in this case, this object has this wonderful skull with all sorts of weird patterning behind it. It has these human-headed plants on the two wings. So there's all sorts of things. So decodesk is where you might want to say, again in a paragraph or in a deco note, if you want to have several different pieces of decoration, a description of the iconography on your object, which again I'm not going to type in here for this example, but that's the sort of thing I might put in there. The second thing then, in addition to the physical description that I might want to add into here, is the history of the object. And the history would tend to be things like the origin, and the origin can include the original date and the original place of the object, and then other provenance type information about the object. So if this is an archaeological object, where was it found? Where has it been taken since? Is it now in a museum? How many other places has it been to in between? And various other things that you might say about it. So these are the three main things that I would say about an archaeological object. So the Ohge place of this object is, in this case, and I'm going to copy that from my notes, it was originally set up in a graveyard, I'm not sure which graveyard, in Cambridge, Middlesex County, Massachusetts, United States, and it is still there. So I'm going to repeat that under provenance. Or perhaps under provenance, I could just say in situ, because that's still where it's always been. The date is a little bit more complicated, because the date, we see the date on the grave. She died in 1708. In fact, on the 6th of August, 1708. So the original date of the inscribing of this object was clearly after August 6th, 1708. Probably not long after. I don't know how long after a burial or a gravestone was normally set up. It can be several months now, but in the early 18th century, I don't know. But that might be enough. If you want to structure that information a little bit more, which I would do if I had a large corpus of things, in order to be able to sort them, to be able to search by date, to do various things like that, I would use some of the date attributes on the Ohge date element. And the attributes here I would put, I would say not before 1708, 08, 06. We know that this was not inscribed before then because, well, I guess we don't know for an absolute fact that this gravestone wasn't put up before she died, but they knew the exact day in which she died, so it seems unlikely. Not after is a little bit harder to specify. Probably it was put up before the end of that year, but I wouldn't want to say that it could have been in December that year, but not in January the year after. I'm just going to say, for the sake of argument, that it was not after 1709. Sometime within 18 months of her dying, this gravestone was put up. I think that's pretty safe to say. Other people might make other decisions about that. So that's I think all I want to say about the description and history of this object. As you can see, this is very different from what we would say about a manuscript that we were transcribing. So over to Christopher for that example.
Okay. So I'm just going to review this manuscript that was previously encoded in the poem structure video tutorial. And here we have a lot of the metadata already available to us and other kinds of information that would be useful in an MS desk. So we can really just copy a lot of this information over. And I'm going to now move over to my text editor. And as Gabby said, MS Desk is an immediate child of Source Desk, and MS Desk requires MS Identifier. And because this is a library item, we're going to want to include some information about the repository. So there's a repository element that we can include. And the repository here is the John Rylands library. And in addition to the repository, one of the most crucial bits of information that we'll want is the IDNO element, which gives us either a shelf mark or a class mark, basically the identifier that the repository uses to identify a particular manuscript item. And for the sake of clarity, you'll usually want to add something like a type attribute. And I'm going to refer to a shelf mark that the Rylands has used. So we have IDNO equals, or type equals shelf mark. And the shelf mark here is English MS 414.7. So I'll just copy that in here. Now, there are other bits of information that are really important for sorting purposes as well. I would say repository and IDNO are the two most important, but you might also want to provide further descriptive information. So, for example, you could use some place elements like settlement, which is used for cities. And we could specify that John Rylands Library is in Manchester. And furthermore, we can add an institution element to make it clear that the John Rylands Library is not only in the city of Manchester, but is also affiliated with the University of Manchester. And that essentially wraps up is the bits of information that I wanted to show for MS Identifier. But there's some other interesting bits of information that we can indicate here. So, for example, we might have an MS Contents element here, which gives us potentially a summary of what's in this manuscript. And that information is thankfully available on the John Rylands metadata. So I'll just copy this description, this summary description of what is contained in this manuscript. And we'll just paste it in here. And as Gabby said in the previous section, the history element can also be a really important element to use for various bits of information, mostly relating to provenance and acquisition information. So he already showed you the originating date, for example, and the originating place. And you can also use those elements for manuscripts, of course, but I wanted to draw your attention to the acquisition element, which allows you to document how the repository acquired a manuscript. And I believe that is here in the acquisition section of the metadata here on the repository's website. And I'll just paste that in as well. And now we have some more information about the history and how the library acquired the information. And that was about all I wanted to show here. You can always add more information. For example, a FizDesk element might document things like the fact that this is written in ink with handwriting, and we have place, origin, and author, and languages, and dates of creation, and so on. Further information that could be documented, but I will also encourage all of you to look at the slides that we have put together here, which show you how an MS Desk is structured and has further information about the various elements that can be nested within MS Desk. So, is there anything else? Gabby, did you have any questions or observations?
No, I think that's good. I think we've given them two different examples, very different things that they might want to encode. I think that's made the point that almost everything except for the MS identifier is optional, and they can encode all of them. MS identifier is also optional if you don't have an MS desk at all. You could just choose not to encode the MS manuscript description, and then you don't need to give it an identifier. But yeah, that's great. I think people can decide how much information they want to encode for their editions and take it from there. Great. Cool.
Great.
Thanks a lot.